Hey everyone, back for week two of Album a Day, or I'm sorry, section two, I guess, of Album a Day, since I've been doing them 2 weeks at a time. For week three, my theme was 2010s Revisited Mark One, because I intend on doing one later in the year as well, once I've gathered a few more recommendations of like necessary albums from the decade that I hadn't yet gotten to. Forgive the dark spot here, by the way. I have a plant right next to my desk that blocks out some of the overhead light, but. All that to say, for the first album for this week, we had A Moon-Shaped Pool by Radiohead. I know some of y'all wanted the album and the name on screen, so I decided to throw that in OBS in real time. It's a nifty little touch. The little note I left for myself while I was talking about or while I was listening to this album for the first time, rather, was good pain, but pain nonetheless. Um, Tinker Tailor was my obvious takeaway for this album, which a couple of my friends have heard me rant about this song since. I apologize. It's top five Radiohead songs, in my opinion. But of course, I'm very heavily biased because I loved this album like front to back. It's a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. Genuinely great album. Outside of that, I really like Burn the Witch. That song hits different. Um, and it was overall like just wonderful front to back. No complaints overall. Um, I also don't know why, but when I heard this album for the first time, I remember hearing a little bit of Give Up the Ghost from King of the Limbs in it. Not something that like influenced the sound of the album or anything, but that's just the song that it called to mind during the listen. So make with that what you will, depending on how you feel about that song. But that's what came to mind for me. And for our second album for the week, we had Two by Unknown Mortal Orchestra. This album, I already needed to censor some of the art for this, so creative liberties aside, um, this album was good, to say the least. It just made me wish I was listening to Innerwave, though. I think they have a better take on this kind of sun-baked psych. Um, Not to discount this album at all, though. The opener is still an incredible song. The last half of it ran through a really nice suite of songs. They all had pretty good chord progressions, all added to that same sun-baked feeling as I mentioned. Overall, I'd give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Not much to say since it is still a fairly, at least acoustically simplistic album, but still very worthwhile. It's an inoffensive listen. For the third album for this week, January 17th, we had Joy as an Act of Resistance by Idols. Goddamn, do I love this album. It took a couple songs for the vocalist to click with me, but once I got into it, I think it was specifically around Danny Nadelko. Let me pull it up here on my other monitor. No, it was I'm Scum that like fully made it register with me. That track hooked me into the album, and I was grooving the full way through. This album's definitely going to end up in my cycling playlist when the weather gets better, not when it's fucking snowbank in the middle of the road tier weather right now because we just had a blizzard yesterday. But this is definitely something that'd get the heart racing and help make those bike rides a little bit more invigorated. 8.5 overall. Definitely has me curious to check out more of their stuff. This album was actually only here because of the cave freestyle they did with Kenny Beats. Uh, and I heard he produced a full album of theirs and a few of their other songs. So that collaboration will be on my radar for the next couple weeks. What was an unknowing trend of the second Psych album of this week? We had The Weather by Pond. It's really good synth-driven psych. The first track was kind of weak compared to the rest of the album, in my opinion, and kind of yikesy thematically, but I also get what it was going for. It just didn't resonate with me at all. Paint Me Silver, Zen Automaton, the title track of the album, and Edge of the World Part 2 were all fantastic, though. Um, although much like with Unknown Mortal Orchestra earlier in the week, and I promise these are the only two albums I have like very severe criticisms of. Um, the kind of felt like a retread of what other groups had done before it better. NGMT specifically comes to mind with this. Although a lot of what they bring to the table is a refinement of it and a slight left turn. So it's familiar enough that it can be discounted if you just look at it at the surface level, but if you look where the contrast is between the two, it shows that like they wanted to paint out a specific sound for themselves. And they did a good job with it overall. It was a pretty good record. Those four songs that I mentioned, absolutely incredible. Paint Me Silver is in my playlist and gets regular rotation. My coworkers have gotten sick of hearing it, and I apologize, but it's not getting off there anytime soon. 8.5 overall, which is surprisingly tied for the second weakest score of this week. And in what is essentially a straight sonic upgrade in most capacities to the previous album, we have Little Dark Age by NGMT. This album is more of the same synth-driven psych from the previous record, incredible in its own regard, but taking it to the next level compared to the previous. The tracks on this one feel a lot more memorable, specifically When You Die, Little Dark Age, the closer. The name's escaping me right now, which is unfortunate, but it's gotten a half dozen plays on my playlist since, and Little Dark Age itself obviously is a well-known song in its own regard. So, really good album, no misses front to back, but I did still slightly prefer Congratulations over this one. That being said, they do both land at a 9 out of 10, so I can't complain too much about this one. For day six, January 20th, we had Pinata by Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. I had already listened to Bandana, which had made me realize how much I loved this duo. Half Man, Half Cocaine was fucking incredible. And the beat switch on Fake Names is one of my favorites of all time. Just more of what I loved Madlib from Mad Villainy and J Lib, two records I'd already loved. But this album cemented their legacy for me. Every single track on this album is replayable. I have High, the title track, and the Absol feature on this record all in my playlist, and they all get plays pretty regularly. Um, I just can't put into words how good the production on this record is. If you haven't listened to anything from Madlib before, this would probably be the best point of entry outside of Mad Villainy, obviously, but that one's a bit more iconic. And Doom, I'd say, is probably a little bit of a higher barrier of entry than Freddie Gibbs in terms of musical appeal to the average person. But they would both serve as a good representation of just how fucking good Madlib is as a producer. Shoutouts to the Suleiman feature on the title track, by the way. Absolutely love his solo music, and I'm glad to see his roots in the industry go this far back. I knew he was associated with Saba and their group, but I didn't know that he had connections with fucking Freddie Gibbs and Madlib of all people. So it was a great inclusion, really interesting to see on the record. Finishing out the 2010s week, we had Cosmogramma by Flying Lotus for the full name. Flamagra and Yasuke were both albums that I absolutely loved. I even have the pop-up book limited edition version of the Flamagra album on vinyl, but this blew them out of the water, in my opinion. My buddy Jack had been not necessarily hounding me, but poking at me to listen to this album for so long, and I definitely know why now. It's more of the incredible production that Flylo is known for, leaning into kind of jazzier, more glitchy influences, and more of what I loved from the other two records. A lot of the inclusions for vocalists on some of the scattered features on the record were great, but I still feel like the production largely carries the flow of the record, obviously, since most of them are instrumental, barring samples. But Flying Lotus is just an incredible rabbit hole to go down if you ever get the chance. He's put out 4 records in the past decade that are all almost perfect. I would recommend checking them all out. This one gets a 9.5 out of 10 from me, though, and it's my personal favorite of what I've heard of his so far. For week 2 of this section of the month, we had the Deep Cuts week, starting with SF Sorrow by The Pretty Things. Um, this feels kind of like the exact intersection between the two different parts of the British invasion. It has a lot of influence from the Rolling Stones, but it's still very clearly influenced by the Beatles as well. Obviously, every artist from this era was, but this takes a very polarizing aspect for both of them and blends them together. It was wonderfully made and questionably mixed, to say the least, but it adds a lot of fun to it. The early tracks had a lot of stereo panning, a lot of chopping, just a lot of neat little things that aren't really thrown in a lot unless they add a certain effect. And here feels like the effect was the point. Um, Overall, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and it has me interested to check a lot or another album of theirs out. But from what I heard, um, this is kind of like the breaking point where they went from their older, more garage rock inspired sound to something more psychedelic. But I could have also just been misremembering the brief skimming I did on Wikipedia like a week ago. Either way, 9 out of 10. Definitely check out Bracelets of Fingers and Baron Saturday as my two favorite takeaways from this album. Next up, we have something rather unique, a prog funk album by a band called Afroskull called Monster for the Masses. This one was a lot of fun to listen to. It felt like an odd blend of BC Boys and Rage Against the Machine with a healthy dose of jazz fusion in to keep things spicy. There's a track on here that I don't know if I can say the name of on YouTube that I will throw on screen here. It's probably my favorite on the record, honestly. But front to back, it's great. The interludes all help add a little bit of a sense of environment to say to the album. It helps add a little bit of immersion. Another fantastic album, 9 out of 10 overall. Can't recommend it enough to anyone who likes either jazz fusion or funk or prog. Any of the three. It's a great blend of them, and it appeals to all three of them for unique reasons, I feel. So definitely worth checking out this one and their other album, which I think was called To Oblivion and Beyond, if I recall correctly. It has a camper van flying through space on the cover. A lot more unique than this one, to say the least, but this logo still goes hard, so I can't really complain. Next up is an album from the band Tortoise. They are a jazzy jam band. I guess, yeah, jam band. And their first album, TNT, was introduced to me through an album club in Zem's Discord server, much like one of the artists from last time. And good lord, this album was another incredible one. This week is like all hits, obviously, since they're albums that were kind of specially curated specifically to be that. But the opener, Jed, had me grooving front to back, absolute incredible song. And then the closing two of Dear Grandma and Grandpa and Along the Banks of the Rivers, absolutely fucking incredible. Um, the album kind of takes a bit of a downturn on the intensity, well, the insanity more so, after the closer, since it is obviously 20 minutes long and does need to justify its runtime to a certain extent. It experiments a lot more with this sound. Um, Towards 16 minutes, there's a weird synthy section that reminds me of Jetty from the previous album of theirs, TNT. But good lord, that section is absolutely incredible. The opener would be what I recommend as a takeaway from this album, but the closer would also serve as a good takeaway if you didn't want to listen to 20 minutes of something you weren't wanting to commit to. Overall, 9 out of 10. Just a little bit below TNT in terms of quality, but still a fantastic album regardless. Next up, remember what I said about accidentally stacking the deck with Psych? We're back with Star Stuff by Chaz Bundick, meets the Matson 2. Chaz Bundick, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the man behind Toro y Moi, which is another great project that I was not terribly familiar with, but I enjoyed the couple of albums that I had listened to in the past. This was not at all what I was expecting from a side project of his, though, and honestly, the surprise couldn't be more pleasant. The opener is an absolutely incredible track. The bass and the lead bounce off each other very well. But the highlight of the album for me was the end of JBS fading into the start of Star Stuff. It felt like you were gradually being blended into an almost ethereal, dune-drenched desert of Psych. And good lord, Chaz's vocals on this album, incredible as always. Don't really have enough praise in the bank for this one. It's getting a 9.5, making it the, I think, second highest rated album from this section, tied with Cosmogramma. So, highest praise I can give for an album I wasn't expecting to be this good. Um, Definitely would recommend if you are into more guitar driven psych. It definitely calls back more to the 60s 70s style psych than the modern more melodic I guess synth driven psych, or the kind of soundscape oriented groups like god, what is their name, I forget it off the top of my head. um Spirit and the Beehive, that's the one. They're another kind of good guitar driven band, but they take it an entirely different direction. All that to say, this is a great time to be a fan of Psych, and I'm finding that out very quickly, and I'm very glad that that is the case because this stuff is really easy to throw on to pretty much any mood, and it helps set the right kind of vibe for the night. So, yeah, definitely would recommend. Next up, we have what's quickly becoming one of my favorite albums of the 90s, Creepin' on a Come Up by Bone Thugs and Harmony. I don't really have words for how good these guys are. I knew their production was incredible. I knew their synergy was incredible, but this is just a statement of an album. The overlapping vocals between the sample, the different members weaving in and out on the chorus, the verses being delivered in such a unique cadence for the time. Um, and such a unique atmosphere to their album. The flows are immaculate, and I still can't believe one of the best beats of the decade was produced, built off of, or was built from just four harmonics. It was a weird start to it, and the fact that it immediately leads fully into the vocalist, or the female vocalist with the lead synth in the background, such an incredible bass line. Good lord. That, and obviously For the Love of Money is another incredible album. Easy E's feature on it definitely earns its spot. He synergizes well with the overall atmosphere that the group was going for, despite bringing his own style to things. Obviously, being from California and Bone Thugs being from Ohio, the rap scenes would have been quite different for their areas. But it's nice to see the sounds blend well together. Um, 10 out of 10 on this one, genuinely. Please listen to it as soon as you can. It is less than a half hour, so you have almost no excuse not to, unless hip hop's not your thing. But even then, this might sell you on it. It's that good. Love this album cover to cover, and I've given it a half dozen listens since the 26th. So it's 31st. Well, just turned 31st. It's midnight now. So in 4 days, I've listened to it probably six times. Can't get it out of my head. Love it. Every single song on it is great. Even the two like minute and a half interludes at the start of the album, they earn their place. They're short, concise, do what they need to do, build a nice little melody, and then bring it to a close. So front to back, perfect album. I can't stress enough that you need to listen to this if you're a fan of rap. Yeah, 10 out of 10. Next up, we have my first venture into my home turf of math rock with Drifter by Concrete Concrete. This is some damn good new age math rock. Reminds me a lot of Toe and How to Count to 1 to 10. If either of those groups mean anything to you. If they don't, I would still very highly recommend both of them. Toe is a great entry point into math rock, especially a book That album is great. I have no theory knowledge outside of terminology, so I can't speak much to the compositional edge of it. But all I know is it sounds great. These guitar tunings hit some of the best notes for me. Just math rock guitar tunings in general. They match this weird, like, the best way I can describe it is driving on a beach in the summer, and that's the kind of vibe they hit for me. Like, just cruising through dunes, having the scent of the ocean blast you. It hits a nostalgia for me, despite not having grown up with this genre, only really falling into it in 2018. It still makes me think of what music sounded like to me when I was a kid. And that makes the genre itself a lot stronger than most other, in my opinion, but I don't have anything to say uh, on this one specifically, other than it's a pretty good, albeit standard, math rock album. 8 out of 10 overall. Wouldn't recommend it as a point of entry or anything into the genre. That would go more to bands like Tide Edit or the Redneck Manifesto, Just Neighbors, stuff like that. But this is still an amazing album, and those familiar enough with the genre will probably enjoy it. Even then, it'd be a good third or fourth listen. It's not a high bar or anything. It just wouldn't win you over if it's not already your thing. Would be a good way to put it. But yeah, 8 out of 10 overall. Looking forward to see what they do in the future, since they show a lot of potential here. All right, and for the last album for this week, we had Wool in the Pants' self-titled. It's a really good Japanese psych funk record. It leans kind of into like a lo-fi acoustic style of funk that almost treads into reggae on a certain couple tracks, or at least very heavily reggae influenced funk. Um, I had been privy to a couple songs on this album before. AO2, AO5, BO3, BO5, and BO6 were all included in some form in Wool in the Pool, their 2020 record that had put me onto the band. But AO2 and AO5 were more trippy, kind of more psych influenced versions of the tracks that I had previously heard. It recontextualizes the original a lot, not only making the more lo-fi, stripped back, minimalistic sound of the version I was familiar with prior that much greater compared to what I thought of it before, but knowing that there's a version with a different direction kind of helps enhance them both, in my opinion. I've had a lot of their music on repeat for the past month or so. They've just been really good, like easy listening. And I love every bit of their music. The only real slump in this album is from BO1 to BO4 isn't the best. BO3 being an exception. I'm a lot more familiar with that one, so I'm a bit more fond of it. Um, but overall, the album is still absolutely fantastic, and the slump is going from like almost perfect, what it's setting out to do, to great but not awesome. So overall, I give the record a 9 for its consistent strengths, aside from a slight fumble. Really good overall. Definitely going to be coming back to this one for a very long time, since it matches a very specific sound that I don't see much elsewhere. All right, taking a look at the scores for the end of this week. This document will be available in the description, by the way. I'll have it be publicly viewable, and I'll try and keep a couple weeks on it ahead of time. So in the event the video ever runs late, like this one has, you're still able to keep up with me along the way. But that being said, referring to the document, the week of the 22nd to the 28th is going to take a while to top. It's got 6 albums above a 9, and the weakest album being an 8 out of 10. So that will be interesting to see if it gets topped soon. The next 2 weeks will be an EDM deep dive, and the following week, the week of the 5th to the 11th, will be a spin-off slash side project album. They will be showing up a document when this goes live. Any feedback is appreciated as always. Let me know if any of the songs from the albums that I had gone over stood out to you, what you would recommend based on how I responded to these albums, and just any overall feedback or criticism as always is appreciated. I tried to experiment a bit more with like the format of this, so if it worked out, let me know. If it didn't work out, of course, also let me know. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.